Hi, this is a short presentation. We only have an attention span as humans of about 10 minutes. So we need to stop and recap in class before you naturally will check out of the lecture. So 1-minute summaries are in-class learning activities. The points that you earn from them will go towards your final grade. And they are short written opportunities for you to practice with the material you need to learn before you're tested on it or before you're trying to cram for a test on it. They show you and they show me what was clear in the lesson and what also needs to be reviewed. They are not tests or quizzes. They don't damage your grade. They only benefit your grade. The harder you try at them, in other words, the more points you'll get towards your grade. So here's how they work. At a break in the lecture, we'll stop to process the material that you just heard, okay? You'll put away your notes and clear the desk and take out a blank piece of paper to write on, and I'll time you for a minute or so. What you're going to do is summarize the most important points of what you just heard and discussed. Use the terms, okay? Write down what they mean. Relate what you learned to your own experience or your observations to get it to sink in. Here's what makes it work. If you hear the material and then you write it down in your own words in your notes and then you write it from scratch again without your notes, you've worked with the material 3 times already. So what makes it work is work. This is seriously more effective than trying to do it weeks after the lecture and cram it into a study session, okay? It's just like working out to strengthen any other muscle in your body. You stretch the brain and it'll be sore at first, but then you'll be stronger. And activities that used to seem difficult will get easier. And what you have to do is use your own words. Use words that you would use to describe some of these terms. Use the words that you would use to explain to somebody, okay? That repetition is important, but using your own words is critical. That's where we really learn. And you know what? Learning is uncomfortable. Look at Lucy there. It is. If you're feeling fine and relaxed, you're probably not learning. So you got to work at working out your brain during these activities to help you retain the material. You're in charge of your learning. I can teach you all day long, but I can't learn you. That's your part. Okay, here's what makes it not work. If you just write down your opinion or an emotional response, it's not appropriate in this particular activity. There will be other times for that, but this isn't one of them. You won't be tested on your opinions, okay? You're going to be tested on the material. So if you write an emotional response or how you feel about the material rather than what you learned from the lesson, this activity is not going to work. Another thing that makes it not work is checking out. We call this passive listening, okay? Sometimes sleeping. And that won't work either. That means that if you want to learn, you've got to work at listening during the lecture, especially if it's not automatically interesting to you what we're talking about. And that really is what separates the people who become good college students and those that just really get bored or it's not cut out for them. Okay, you got to really work at listening and making it your own. All right, we may do some variations of this called a pair share, and this is where you're going to exchange summaries after you do them with a partner, and you'll read them and compare what you wrote and then write down the things you had in common and the things that were different. And this is really, really powerful because then not only do you get it in your words, but you get to hear it in somebody else's words as well as students. And that's better than mine too, at least in terms of you learning it. Here's some examples from previous students. I want to show you what an opinion looks like. I mentioned before that opinions don't work. Check this one out. Opinion. This is not the material. See if you can see why. Freud's beliefs were unreal to me. I wouldn't call it hysteria. I would call it taking advantage of this human body. People then had way more beliefs than the ones of our time. Some were logical, some completely insane. Although we still have some of those beliefs similar to Freud's, ours have evolved into better explaining. some of that was hard to understand, but can you see how this is a person that's responding emotionally? There's nothing in there that talks to you about Freud that has facts or that has evidence of the lecture in there. So we don't want that. Now let's look at another alternative. All right, this is summarized material. First bullet, culture was extremely sexually repressed. This influenced Freud's theories. Freud's subjects often were women with hysteria, which is like a freak out and freeze. There was something else about repression or regression that I get mixed up and I need to ask or look up. Okay, now this is very good. Okay, these are main points from the lecture. They are things that this person learned. The one before, they didn't learn anything in there except that maybe Freud was associated with something called hysteria. And we'll look at what that means in the terms of the points they earned in a little bit. But look over here. On the right, she's also putting it into her own words. The hysteria is like a freak out and freeze. It's these women who literally freak out and then their bodies freeze up. So that is putting it into her words. She's using critical thinking there. And the bottom bullet, she's trying to work at it, okay? She's trying to see, and that tells me where she didn't get it also. There was something about repression or regression that I get mixed up and need to ask or look up. Now, if she asks me about it, or she looks it up and puts the answer in it, then that is very good. She's really learning, and she doesn't have to study then when it comes time for the test because she's already done the work. Here's one more. This is another thing that happens a lot, is that I'll get a list. Now, this doesn't tell me that this person understands anything. This is just a list of terms. You know, for a 1-minute summary to write just penis envy, Oedipus complex, biological approach, humanistic approach, cognitive approach. This does not tell me anything that student learned at all, okay? And they may have, but I don't see it here, and that's what we're looking for in the 1-minute summary, so we don't want that. Now, what we do want is, here's another good one. I think Freud's theory was from the psychodynamic approach. Now, this is an opinion. He's not saying, I feel like Freud's theory was from the psychodynamic approach. He's remembering. The psychodynamic approach wasn't even in the lecture, but he remembers what the psychodynamic approach means. Okay? And so he's associating Freud's theory with it, and he's absolutely right. That is very good critical thinking. He's making these connections with previous lectures. And his second bullet, he thought that the reason boys at 6 or 7 rejected dad and got close with mom is because they realized they have a penis and dad is the only competition around, so got to get dad out of the way. He called this penis envy. All right, so there's a lot of grammar errors, there's a lot of spelling errors and whatnot, but what he's doing there is he's really summarizing exactly what the Oedipus complex is. Okay, so that's really good. So let's look at how these were graded then. On the one that was an opinion, this is how you'll see your grade on the 1-minute summaries, okay? CT is critical thinking. PPL is participation in peer learning. DL is a demonstration of learning. HL is habits of learning. If you're getting out your pencil and you're writing the whole time, you'll probably get a couple of points for that, just for doing it, you know? Just for actually getting out your pencil. Demonstration of learning. For this particular example, I can tell that they might not have learned what hysteria was, but they can tell it was from the body, because there's the human body down there, and they can tell that Freud was associated with it. It's not much, but I'm going to give them that. Okay, they learned something about Freud associated with hysteria. So they get 2 points for that. That's not much, but that's something. On the summarized one, very different, because putting it into their own words, those critical thinking points, that gets 5 points right off the bat. And the habits of learning, they wrote the entire time, and they wrote summarized material, so that was the habit of learning that got the 5 points. And look, demonstration of learning, I can really tell. This person remembered that the culture was sexually repressed. That was something that we talked about in the lecture. And she is explaining it in a way that the previous example did not. So I can tell that this person learned and is practicing because it shows me in the example. Okay, here's the point spread on the word list. Demonstration of learning, I can't really tell that this person learned anything except maybe how to spell the list. So they got 1 point for demonstration of learning and 2 for habits of learning for just taking out a pen. Again, here on the other example, this student is explaining and putting into his or her own words the Oedipus complex. That gets a full 5 points. Easy sneezy right there because he did so well. And then on the demonstration of learning, there's a lot in here because not only is he learning something in that lecture, but like I said before, he's associating it with a previous lecture. Please let me know if you're confused about this or if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class.